G'day, Bomber fans. We are back with a post-draft best 23. Today, I'm not going to be predicting what I think the team will look like in round one against Hawthorn next year. I'm going to be picking my personal team that I think should be lining up to take on and hopefully beat the Hawks in round one of 2026. These videos are really hard to make. This year, even more so, because 2026 it's very unpredictable. You've got all these young players who have played senior footy, so it's hard to know who's ahead of who in the pecking order. I'm going to try and answer those questions today as best I can. In my opinion, of course. Let's just get into it. As we always do, you start with the back line. We are starting with the defense, and I think with any defense in any sport really around the world, what you're doing first is throwing in names that you build the team or the structure around. I don't think there's many at Essendon that you cement in the team week in, week out, but there are two that come to mind that I think of as almost undroppable. These two guys I think are players that you just keep in there. You nail their spot down in the best 23, and those two players are Zach Reid and Jordan Ridley. I think this is the pairing and the combo that Essendon fans want to be seeing. We just need to see more of these two guys. For the last 2 years, or 3 years actually, the club's really been trying to get games into these two alongside each other. You throw in Ben Mackay as well, who I'll talk about in a second, and it hasn't worked. They've played 6 games together since 2023, Jordan Ridley and Zach Reid. 4 of those games were wins for the Bombers, and all 6 of those games came in 2025. So, they obviously played a little bit of footy before their injuries in 2025. In 2024, Zach Reid played a half of footy in round 1, got injured. Jordan Ridley didn't play that game because he was injured going into it. So, and then the year before that, Zach Reid missed pretty much the entire season. So, it's just been incredibly frustrating because you can see how these two will work together. We have seen it. They've been on more often than not when those two are playing together. It is a winning Essendon team. 4 of the 6 games they've played together in their career in the last 3 years have been wins, which is that's great. And you think about Zach Reid, who's growing, becoming a better player each year, you'd think, if he gets on the park. But I look at Zach Reid last year in that block of games from round 4, from Port Adelaide onwards, when he was tagged on, left on Mitch Georgiadis against Port Adelaide. From that moment, he just felt like it was like a new signing, It was like a Zach Reid that we hoped to see but didn't expect to see. Like, he was playing fantastic footy. I didn't think he was going to be that good, me personally, but it was a great surprise seeing him play elite footy until that injury against Richmond, obviously. And for Jordan Ridley, we know this guy. Like, we know how classy and composed he is and how versatile he is as a defender. I've often said that he's our second most important player. That may not be true anymore because he's played 19 games in 2 seasons, so you're just not getting the most out of him. But I think those two players, if fit, there's really no reason why they're not playing footy. I think when they play, they're usually very good, and if they're playing footy together, it means good things for the Bombers. You've got a really nice combo there, and the funny thing about it is that I think for it to work, for those two to really work together, you almost have to act as if they're the second and third key defenders. So I think Jordan Ridley's great as a third floating, intercepting key defender, roaming around the 50, kind of using his footy smarts and his class with the footy to distribute and run around with it. Zach Reid's kind of that second defender who can be accountable for a really good key forward. He often is, but if the system's working, I think Zach Reid is better on the second, the least dangerous key forward, and really intercepting and using those long arms to win the footy for our team and distribute as well. I think Jordan Ridley and Ben Mackay are so great because they have distribution to their game. They're lovely kicks of the footy. What you got to do though is throw in someone who's solid and sound behind them, who can play on the best key forwards each week. And I think it's still Ben Mackay. I'm putting Ben Mackay down here. I'm not ruling out Lewis Hayes as an option. I think he's someone who could really have a boom when he comes back from that ACL injury. And I'd expect him to be challenging for that spot, for Ben Mackay's spot in that team, when he does come back. That is the hope. But you look at what Ben Mackay has done in the last few years compared to Lewis Hayes, who's played a half of footy before that ACL. But I think Ben Mackay is actually really slept on as a prospect, as a player, because, in 2024, he was one of the leading intercepting defenders in the competition. In 2025, he played less footy, but he was actually pretty solid before his injury. Like, you look at how his opponents go on him, and they never really kick bags. I could be wrong. Correct me if I'm wrong, but he was, pretty solid each week and never had a bag kicked on him. He was probably a bit more timid and less attacking in the air than he was the year before, which was a big change from 2024, and that was a bit of a negative that I saw. And he's also someone that you don't really trust with the footy. You don't want him to be the one distributing distributing, getting 15 to 20 touches a game. But I think in a system where you've got Ben Mackay locking down on the best key forwards, the Marby or Chol types, or who else do Hawthorn have? Mitch Lewis, whoever's playing, you can have Zach Reed and Jordan Ridley a bit more mobile, a bit free. You can free them up to intercept and then go. That's the great thing about both these players, is that they can intercept and use the footy really well. I think that's a pretty solid back three, and that's a back three that the Bombers ideally would be getting lots of games into, but of course in the back half of 2025 they were all injured together. The others you're looking at, if there are more injuries, Lewis Hayes, when he comes back from the ACL, is the big one. I think he's next in line to play out of the key defenders. You've also got Nick Cox, who played a fair bit of key defence in 2024 before that concussion. It wasn't great footy in defence, but he was still playing in defence. Same with Lockie Blackiston, not really naturally a defender, but he played quite a bit there last year. But that's like a break glass in case of emergency option. I don't think Lockie Blackiston is a defender. I thought he competed well there last year, but you could tell that he was a ruckman playing in defence. You've got Max Kontagiannis, my boy. I think he's going to take a bit longer to develop with those skinny arms. The one to really watch out for here, and this is an interesting one because he's been doing really well at training lately, but Mr. Kale Jarayan, he was drafted as a key forward or a ruckman. He moved back to defence last year out of necessity for the VFL. Hasn't played an AFL game yet. I think he was the only player on the list last year to have not played an AFL game, but maybe 2026 is the year, because he's apparently looking really trim and fit in training. His fitness was a big issue coming into 2025, but into 2026 he's looking a lot fitter. He's really good with the footy as well, which would kind of be a nice blend for Zach Reed and Jordan Ridley, or even if one of those guys goes down, because you've got a nice ball user, probably not confident at AFL level with the footy yet, because you haven't seen that confidence heaps in the VFL, but you can see why someone like Kale Jarayan, if he puts a few good games together, strings some good performances in the reserves, could make a bit of a bump and a move for an AFL spot. I wouldn't be surprised if he plays a game next year, but I'm not going to lock it in. I think guys like Lewis Hayes are ahead of him in the discussion. So who else are we adding alongside these guys in defence on ground level? The first name I'm going to put down is Mason Redman. I think this is, and it's a big year for Mason Redman really, because you look at what's happened with the Zach Merritt situation. Obviously, we've lost our captain. We've lost a big leader at the club. There are going to be quite a few senior players looking to really step up, and you can tell that Mason Redman already is one of those guys that wants more responsibility on his shoulders. This is someone who I think would really want to be captain, and he's been in the captaincy conversation a bit, this year. I still think it's Andy McGrath's to lose, but you could see that Mason Redman would, he's a fair candidate for a vice captaincy role. I really wouldn't be surprised. In fact, I'd say he's probably the favourite for that role at the moment. So yeah, this is someone who wants to step up and be more of a leader, and if that's the case, you'd want him playing lots of footy. I think he's someone who probably actually could even benefit from that added responsibility. In 2023, it felt like he was the main man in that back line, and then all these big names. Mackay comes in, Ridley starts playing a bit more footy in 2024. Zach Reed starting 2024. So Mason Redman's emergence in 2023 kind of stagnated, and I'm not saying he has to get back to that level, but it would be good. like the drive and power out of Mason Redman a couple of years ago was awesome, and you could see if a fully fit Mason Redman playing that type of footy, week in, week out was in that Bombers lineup, it would benefit us greatly, and I think we saw it a bit last year. I thought his back end of the year, the last 5 or 6 games were really strong, and he was one of our better players to round out the year, but he was a bit inconsistent with it. I think, you get a solid defender at worst, which is good, but you want the best of Mason Redman, who's that drive and that power out of the back half. And I think with the vice captaincy role, or just another added role in the leadership group for him, you could see that. I think he's someone who would like the responsibility and clearly wants the responsibility. He seems like he's going to be a big figure at the club in 2026. But the guy, and this is an interesting one because it really comes down to what position you play him in. The guy who I think has the most responsibility on his shoulders in 2026 is Andy McGrath. I'm slotting him into the back pocket. I think this is our captain in 2026. I'd be surprised if someone else gets the nod ahead of him. Obviously, we don't know till we know, but at the moment, you'd be guessing it is Andy McGrath. The question many will ask is, can a non-midfielder or just, a back pocket player be a captain? The answer is yes. I don't get why that is how many captains over the years, how many great captains, Nick Maxwell, these types of guys have been back pockets who, don't win heaps of the footy. They're not stars of the comp. Some of the best captains of all times aren't stars. They're just role players who play to their role but lead on and off the field. And that is what Andy McGrath does. So I'm not worried about him in a back pocket. I do think, by the way, McGrath probably plays his best footy in the midfield, and we saw that last year. But it doesn't mean that it's best for the team having him in the midfield, because he only really played in the guts because we were missing guys like Caldwell, Parrish, Sam Durham, even Merritt for a week as well. I think that move to the midfield was out of necessity. I could see him, playing gut in the midfield if there are some injuries, because he is probably one of our best midfielders, but we don't really have anyone in our team on ground level who are capable of really locking down the best small forwards in the competition. And you could say Jaden Ewan he could be that, but we don't have the evidence that he can be that every week for a season. And we have evidence that Andy McGrath is that. How many times have we gone up against teams whose small forwards have just been completely pocketed, and we don't even really give them acknowledgement? I think if we look back to 2021, when we'd just been eliminated by the Bulldogs in the final, Cody Waitman kicked a bag of goals on us. He was awesome. What we were all screaming out for a small defender who could lock down on these forwards. We brought in Jake Kelly for that reason, I'm fairly sure, but it ended up being Andy McGrath's move to the fence that really gave us stability in that area of the ground, and we've taken it for granted now. It's been a few years since the issues with defending small forwards, but since that we haven't really had any issues defending the small forwards and containing them. Go back the last few years, find me some games where a small forward went absolutely berserk against the Bombers, because I don't think you will. And if that's the case, it's because Andy McGrath is doing such a good job on them. I do think he can improve his ball skills 100%. I'm with you guys on that, but the Andy McGrath hate is just, I'll never understand it. I really don't. I get that he's a pick one and probably not living up to that pick one mantle, but I don't think you really need to. He's not the guy that we he didn't select himself at that position. You can blame Adrian Dodoro for that selection. Don't have blame on Andy McGrath. He's been nothing but loyal and a great servant to the club since he came across, and I'm keen to see him captain, because the young players have nothing but praise for Andy McGrath, especially in the defensive zone. He's been a bit of a mentor to guys like Jaden Ewan along the way. So yeah, I think we're a better team with Andy McGrath in it, and I think for system and shape and structure, it makes more sense having him in the defensive half, so we can have those midfielders like Caldwell and Durham and Parrish, if fit, all playing in the midfield together. The last name in defence, and this is a good name. This is someone who I think we're all already talking about as a leader of the club, which is crazy, because I think he's only just turned 20 years old, or he's 19 about to turn 20. He's very young. And that guy is, of course, Archie Roberts. He's a genuine chance to be in the leadership group for 2026 at 20, which is crazy. But he's talked recently about wanting to be a captain, which I love, because you see captain material with Archie Roberts. He just oozes leadership, oozes maturity, really tries for the team as well, which is great. He's been working so hard on the defensive side of his game to improve his stability behind the ball. And maybe Archie Roberts is the type of player that can unlock Andy McGrath to move into the midfield. We don't know it yet, so I'm not going to predict it, but I wouldn't be surprised if we see Archie Roberts go to a new level with his defensive nous, but also his ball use and his skills as well, because it does seem like he's been one of the few guys at training, just really training the house down every day so far this year, which is awesome. You love to see that, but it's not unexpected. We know what Archie Roberts is like. He's a genuine workhorse. He seems to love the club as well, and we're really lucky to have gotten him in the draft so late in that 2023 draft. So that back line, I think, is made a lot better and a lot more exciting having Archie Roberts in it. Of course, he can also play midfield. We saw him move into the midfield a bit last year, but I'd still be working him off halfback or in the back pocket, kind of patrolling the area, keeping his forwards accountable, and just being Archie Roberts, being that lovable little larrikin. Now, if you're looking at some names who are unlucky to miss here, I will go through the B team a bit later in the video, but you've got guys like Jaden Ewan, who I thought played really well to round out the year. I just don't think you see enough of him with the footy to suggest that he can be a genuine week-to-week AFL player yet. I do love those defensive attributes though, and he really does crack in, so it's good that he played games last year for that. Jackson Pryor's another that I think is really unlucky, because this is my boy. I'm leaving Jackson Pryor out of the team. That doesn't feel right, does it? But he's a great squad depth player. I think he's in the squad for depth, and as depth he's great. He played every game last year. He's durable, he's reliable. You've also got Zach Johnson, who I think could take a bit of a step forward in 2026. I liked the look of him last year. He's obviously going to have his first preseason this year. He had that shoulder injury going into last year's preseason, so we're probably going to see a fitter and healthier Zach Johnson, which bodes well for the Bombers, because he is a lovely player on the footy. Needs to improve his defensive craft a little bit, I think, before he plays regularly, but I wouldn't be surprised if he plays a fair bit of footy in 2026 2026. Okay, let's move on to the midfield, and it's interesting. We'll start with the wings because they're probably the easiest position to discuss of the video. It's pretty simply Xavier Dersma and Braden Fiorini patrolling each wing. I think that makes the most sense, and I think it's a really good combo. It's probably the best combo that we've had as a wing partnership in a long time at Essendon. I can't remember the last time that I felt this good and this confident about our wing duo just being, stable and reliable. Xavier Dersma, we know he's that more that hard edge, that work rate, up and back wingman type. He doesn't just track back to help out the team, but he can also creep forward and hit the scoreboard as well, which is really important. I've really liked Dersma since he joined the club. He obviously had some injuries in 2024, but really battled hard in 2025 when all was against him. He's great in the system, and I think Braden Fiorini on the other wing is only going to make Dersma better because Braden Fiorini is just as reliable, works just as hard, he's really fit as well. I really like his ball use. I think this is something that is probably slept on a bit with Braden Fiorini, is that he's a good kick of the footy, a really reliable kick of the footy, not really a goal scorer like you see with Dersma, but he can progress the ball forward and get into good spaces and use that maturity and that leadership to really help his team. I think the wing is a really important position to have experience and durability and maturity in, and I think both these guys are experienced, mature, maybe a bit to be seen with the durability. If Dersma can get through the season, I'll give him a tick there. But if these guys can play 20 games together, I think it's great for the Bombers in our system, and it really helps our need to defend, offensive transition. I think our defensive transition will be a lot better having these two guys in it, and I'm really happy about that wing partnership. Now, obviously, we've got to throw a name in the midfield, and the first name on the team sheet every week has to be Zach Merrett. I know that you've got the situation, the fact that he wanted to leave the club. He's handed in the captaincy. It was pretty ugly, of course, and there was a solid, chunk of time there where we thought that maybe we'd be lining up against Zach Merrett in round 1 next year, but that is not the case. He has stayed with Essendon, and if he is fit, if he is healthy and wanting to play footy, then he has to play footy. There's no need to punish him anymore over that failed trade. I think what we know about Zach Merrett is that he's going to work hard and try to win no matter what. He might not want to be at Essendon this year, and he might want to leave to go to Hawthorn at the end of 2026, but I think in between that, he's going to be playing good footy for the Bombers. It's in his best interest to be playing good footy, and I think if Zach Merrett is playing good footy, it means that the team is probably playing better footy, because this guy is just, he's our best player. He's probably going to go on to win, his 7th Crichton medal at the end of the year. I really wouldn't be surprised. Zach Merrett he has to be in the team. Now, you throw a few more names into the midfield. I really like the 1-2 punch of Sam Durham and Jai Caldwell together. I think these guys are they're the heart and soul players in the midfield. They just crack in and try, and you need that. Like there are so many midfielders with silky skills, classy, good ball users, exciting players, but they might be lazy. You can't say the same about Sam Durham and Jai Caldwell. Maybe they can improve their silkiness and their class a little bit on the footy, but they're not lazy. These guys work really hard, especially in the contest. They are absolute bulls in the contest. Sam Durham's a bit of a wrecking ball, throws his body around everywhere. He's also someone I can see resting forward a bit. And the club, by the way, last year, there was a period of time where it seemed like there was going to be a bit of a move for Sam Durham, who plays half games midfield, half games up forward as a marking target. It didn't happen because of all the injuries, including injuries to Sam Durham. But I think that could be the case again in 2026. I wouldn't be surprised if this guy is a bit of an X factor, throw them forward of the ball, see what can happen type player. I think he's got the capabilities to do that. Jai Caldwell is a more rounded midfielder. You don't see him playing, he can play a forward flank, I guess, but it's not going to be a regular occurrence. I think he is mostly playing full-time midfield minutes. He's really rounded. He's good inside and out. I think he's just a really good player who tries hard for the team, which you love. Already that midfield is actually looking pretty good. Merrett, Caldwell, Durham. Obviously we didn't see heaps of it because of the injuries last year, but if fit, that is good. Now, one of the big questions for 2026 is going to be surrounding our ruck stocks and what we do with our ruckmen, who the first team ruckman is. It's tough, Can Essendon, with the ruck stocks that we have, produce 2 ruckmen in the same game? Clubs love to do that. Brad Scott likes to do that. I'm gonna go out on a limb and say you can't. I don't think these 2 rucks together really work. I think Nick Bryan is more suited to being the main ruck on his own. You don't really see him resting forward to good effect. He can kind of sit back in a hole in defence, but it's not really what you want a ruckman doing heaps. I think the more mobile and athletic, and probably the more suited to the rule changes coming into effect in 2026, is Lockie Blackiston. So, and of course you've got the ACL injury to Nick Bryan, who might not be back for round 1. We'll see. But Lockie Blackiston, I think even with the ACL, I think I'm backing Lockie Blackiston to be the beneficiary of those rule changes. The rules rule changes are going to be affecting the more stand and deliver type rucks. I don't think Nick Bryan is slow or unathletic, but you look at the difference between him and Lockie Blackiston, who leaps at the ball, has good awareness, good time on the footy as well. He's someone who roams a bit, and of course, being able to play defence shows that he's got more versatility in his game when he's not rucking than Nick Bryan does. So I'm going to go with Lockie Blackiston as Essendon's main ruck in 2026. I think it makes the most sense, but I don't feel good about that. I think that, losing Sam Draper definitely hurts. I don't, it just does. There's obviously quite a few who have forgotten about him already and wanted him to move in the first place for the draft picks. I would have rather he'd stayed. I think Sam Draper at Essendon, if he's fit, obviously, we don't know what that Achilles is going to be like, but, he would be a great ruck to have in 2026 with the rule changes. And then you could have a Nick Bryan alongside him as well, in a dual ruck setup. But I think the way Essendon's rucks are stationed at the moment, I don't think there's much room for a dual ruck setup. Even Vigo Vicentini is a bit green. I don't think he's going to play much footy in 2026. We'll see. Now we're just going to move to the bench really quick to throw in some other names in the midfield so you guys don't think I'm leaving anyone out. We'll start with Darcy Parish. I think if this guy is fit, which he is at the moment at training, he is a very good player. He's just a very reliable accumulator. He's really good at finding holes in transition. I think he's one that you use in kick-ins quite a bit on short stab kicks. He finds good space and can progress the ball forward slowly, yes, but he can progress it forward in those stagnating plays, which we hope we don't see much of. It's really, you look at Darcy Parish, who's a great contest midfielder, really reliable at finding the footy in close at personal. His clearance work is exceptional. You don't really, it's hard to understand because he doesn't look like he'd be a great clearance midfielder, but he just has stoppage IQ that other players don't have. I think the main issue with the Darcy Parish is transition footy and whether or not he can be that number that rotates back as well as rotating forward. So that's the big question with Darcy Parish. I think if he's fit, he definitely can, but we haven't seen a fit Darcy Parish for a while. I'm still going to back him in. I think if he's fit, you're playing him. The only reason I wouldn't be playing him really is because he's lacking in fitness. But when he's up and about, he is a great player. The other guy I want to throw on the team, and you guys might like this because it's the first debutant of the video, Mr. Dyson Sharp. I'm going to have Dyson Sharp in our midfield next year. I think it makes sense too. I think we've got good midfielders, but the depth isn't quite there yet. And if we had guys in the team still, maybe like a fit Will Setterfield, we don't know if he's going to be fit or even on the team next year. Maybe Dyson Sharp would spend a few weeks in the VFL, but I think you can easily fit another midfielder into the mix, especially with the flexibility that you have with a Zach Merritt who can rest behind the ball, Sam Durham rests forward of the ball, Jai Caldwell's played on a flank as a kind of pseudo stoppage-to-stoppage midfielder playing outside of the midfield. I think Dyson Sharp is more suited to just being a pure midfielder, and I think there's still room in the team for him, even though that's the case. I don't think there's as much versatility in Dyson Sharp's game as what some people claim to think. I think if he's playing good footy, it's as a full-time midfielder, and I think there is a way for him to fit in this team, even with those limitations. He can rest forward a little bit and hit the scoreboard, but I think if he's playing good footy, it's going to be in the midfield, and I could see him playing midfield footy early for the Bombers, with the flexibility and the versatility that we have in this team. So those are the two other midfielders I've got in the mix. You've got Zach Merritt, Jai Caldwell, Sam Durham, Darcy Parish, Dyson Sharp. Those are 5 already that can rotate in and out. I'm going to have a few more in the forward line as well to talk about as well. Before we get to the forward line though, a few midfielders that might be unlucky to miss the team. Elijah Sardis is probably the big one. Obviously Nick Martin would be in there, a certified starter, but he's got that ACL, so we're not going to include him in this video. But Elijah Sardis is the one that's going to work really hard to find his way in that team. I don't think you can fit all the players I've named, Dyson Sharp and Elijah Sardis, in that team together. I just don't think that makes much sense. You've obviously got Will Setterfield if he does play footy next year for the Bombers. It hasn't been confirmed yet that he's going to be signing on, but it is being rumoured. And after that, there's really not a lot, is there? It's not a very deep midfield. I think you've got good talent in there, but it's not deep. You don't have heaps of depth. So as soon as a few players go down, you're looking at a bit of a makeshift midfield like we saw last year. Let's go to the forward line. This is probably the zone that needs the most fixing in the next few years. I think this is where there's a lot of excitement, but it's not deep. So we'll start with some excitement. We'll start with Isaac Kako, who I'll put on a flank. I think this guy is almost a lock to play every game he's available for now. And how rare is that? A player that comes in round 1 in his first season, plays every game for the year, gets better as the year goes on, by the way. That's something that gets slept on a bit, is this guy was improving as the year went on, which is crazy for an 18-year-old. I was really liking what he produced late in the year, and I've got there's a lot of excitement there with me and you guys as well for Isaac Kako. I think we know know that this guy could be a good small forward going forward. And it's not just, about kicking goals, because that was probably the area of the game that he needs to improve a bit next year, finding more time on the scoreboard. But I really liked his link play. I liked the way that he got up the ground. His midfield minutes really helped with that as well late in the year. You saw that he could be that impact midfielder who, only features at about 5 or 6 centre bounces, but has an impact when he's there. But it's the way that he uses the ball going forward, progresses the ball, which is really, you need that in a small forward. We don't really have a small forward that can do that consistently. You guys know who I'm thinking of right now, who often plays on that flank. But I've got Isaac Kako kind of taking Jade Gresham's role a bit next year. I think you can have players around him who can be that more stay-at-home type. I think Isaac Kako will be better in this role and a lot more exciting in this role for the club going forward as well. And next to Isaac Kako, I've got his good mate, Mr. Nate Caddy. These two together are just, this is the thing keeping Essendon fans sane. I think we'd have lost the plot if it wasn't for Nate Caddy and Isaac Kako, but these guys look really, really good. There's a fair bit of X factor about this little combo. The fact they're good mates, they're both so exciting as players. You watch Nate Caddy, who can just do things on the footy field that others can't, and of course it is uncommon because he's so young. Sometimes he has those quiet games where he goes missing. He maybe has a bit of a he could probably improve his resilience and concentration in games, which is, fair for a 19 or 20-year-old. But you can see this guy, once he gets it together and ages a bit and puts more muscle on his bones and more ticks along in the games column, he could be a genuine freak of a player. And you can see that because, how rare is it to have a key forward so mobile, so good in the air as well. Really a proper weapon in the air, but so mobile and athletic and gets around the ground and outworks their opponents. This is someone who you don't just put one defender on. He's someone you have a plan for. And I think Nate Caddy next year is going to be really exciting if he can get past that groin issue, because Caddy and Kako together is great. But if you throw in Sullivan Roby as well, that's even better. I've got Sullivan Roby playing footy next year early. I think the back is obviously something you have to watch out for. But if it is just a end of 2025 occurrence and he comes back in 2026 for pre-season, I'd have no reasons to suggest that Sullivan Roby wouldn't play footy early into his career. I don't think he'd play as a midfielder, even though he could be in the future. But I think this guy's got enough X factor and competitiveness and strength and size to be a really good forward half player. He's 192, could be a marking target, but his mobility, having been a shorter player a few years ago, it shines through and it gives him a bit more versatility as an option in the forward line, and it makes him more dangerous as an option for defenders to think about on the other team. So there's your future right there. Isaac Kako, Nate Caddy, Sullivan Roby, all next to each other, holding hands. How good is that? Here's where it gets a bit harder and less exciting. So you have to think about how you get games into these young kids and how you really pair them along with some experience that can take the load off them. I had to think about chucking Archer May in that full forward spot because I do like what he is doing for the future, but I just think if you're wanting to get the best out of Nate Caddy and Isaac Kako and Sullivan Roby and these types of players, you want experience, you want maturity, and you want some players who can play, different roles as well. So that's why I've got Kyle Langford and Peter Wright in the forward line next year. I think, with Peter Wright, you've obviously got someone who can take the pressure off Nate Caddy in the forward line and be that marking target who probably warrants the best key defender on each team just because of his size and aerial presence, and also the fact that he can kick goals from anywhere. He's got a wider range of the goals he can kick, so he has to be held accountable, in more spots around the ground, which is a genuine weapon. It's also his ruck capabilities as well. This is someone who can take a bit of pressure off Lockie Blackiston in the ruck and let him have a bit of a rest, and I think that's something that kind of gets it flies under the radar a bit with Peter Wright's game. We see him not kicking 5 and 6 goals every week. People freak out, but really you look at what guys like Todd Goldstein were able to do and how they lasted seasons so long last year. A big reason for that was Peter Wright, who rucked a lot more than he should have been. So I think next year he'll be playing a lot more key forward, but being that second ruck that can pinch it in there as well. Whereas Kyle Langford, I don't even think is locked to the forward line. I think this guy has played his best footy as a forward. He was All-Australian squad in 2023, kicked 50 goals that year, 50 goals the next year. Obviously had his injuries last year, but I think the best footy that he played last year was off a wing. He came back late in the year, played off a wing, I think even half back and half forward a bit. He was kind of Mr. Fix-It, plugging holes that we had because of injury. That's kind of the Kyle Langford that I see going forward. I think you can even have like an Archimay, as a forward if he keeps playing well in the VFL. Maybe you can have someone else there. I'll talk about that in a second. But I think with Cole Langford, this is someone who's versatile enough, who's really aerobic capacity is just better than those around him, given his athletics background. It means he can run out games on a wing, halfback flank. He's played a bit of midfield. He can play quite a few positions, Cole Langford, and I think that's why he's a genuinely valuable member of the team. In fact, you don't even have to have him in the forward pocket. I've just got him here because he's probably our second or third best forward at the moment, but it probably makes more sense having him coming off the bench and just plugging whatever hole he can. Now, the last spot in the forward line is probably the toughest because there are quite a few players you could pick here, and that is not a good thing. I think quite a few of these players are very young and skinny, and you're really clutching at straws having them in the team. You could go for a Reece Unwin or a Hussein Elachkar, but really, is that the best thing for the club? Probably not, as they're so green and young. I'd probably rather than playing VFL. You could argue Jade Gresham, but I'm not going to do that. I'm going to throw Matt Guelphy in the forward pocket. I think this is someone who, at least what he does, at his worst, is try and negate. He's someone that, pesters an opposition defender. He's played really great roles in the past on guys like James Sicily and Lachie Whitfield. Some of the best games from 2024 from an individual I remember being Matt Guelphy, locking those guys down, but also hitting the scoreboard at the same time and having an impact with ball in hand. So this guy is a genuine role player. That's why I like him on the squad right now. That's why I like him in the team. I think you can definitely upgrade this area and have a bit more excitement and maybe some more goal sense and creativity in the forward line, but I don't think we really have that on our list right now, unfortunately. If we drafted maybe a Lachie Doverston type, he'd be right in the team, you'd think, but I think as it is right now, Matt Guelphy, he by default finds that spot in that forward pocket. By no means I'm not trying to disrespect Matt Guelphy as a player, but I think we're at the stage now in our build that we don't want to be having role players at that age kind of lingering around because there's nothing else to overtake them. In an ideal world, what we have happening next year is Matt Guelphy fully fit and having guys like Hussein Elachkar, Jade Gresham, Reece Unwin, these small forwards breathing down his neck and trying to take his place in the team. And I'd really love some friendly competition in that small forward spot because that's definitely a spot that we can be improving. But that is the forward line. So there are 3 more spots on the team, 3 more bench spots to fill. I'm going to fill one of them with Mr. Angus Clark. I just think this guy has to play as much footy as humanly possible next year. This is someone that I think we're going to be genuinely, building the list around in quite a few ways. I think there's quite a few young players, the Archie Roberts, Caddy, Kako, the new draftees. I'd throw Angus Clark in there as well as one of these guys for the future that we're building the list around. And I think the great thing about Angus Clark is that he's not a set position. It's not like you build around him on the wing. He's obviously great on the wing, but he's also really good in defense. He can kick goals as well. He's a genuine utility, and I think on a 5-man bench, having a utility like Angus Clark, who can play a bunch of different positions, but also, if needed, settle in on that wing and just work really hard both ways, I think that's great. And I think Angus Clark really has to play a lot of footy next year, or I'll be very disappointed, and so will my mother. She is a big Angus Clark fan. Speaking of my mother, obviously she gave Angus Clark the tick of approval last year. This year, she has given it to Jacob Farrow, who I've got on the bench as well. I think this guy is, I said it in my my Jacob Farrow profile video that I think this guy could play a lot of senior footy going forward, and he's the type of player that I think once he makes the first team, he probably stays in there a bit like Archie Roberts. When this guy is ready, I think he's going to be ready to really play. It's not like you have some players, they have these weaknesses that kind of float in and out of their game a bit, but Jacob Farrow's weaknesses are his defensive traits, his endurance a bit. When those weaknesses are overcome and fixed, his game's going to be really well-rounded, and he's going to be someone who can only build and build from there. So I think Jacob Farrow plays footy early and plays a lot of footy going forward because we need good ball users in the team. We really, especially out of the back half, we really don't have much. We've got, Zach Reed, Jordan Ridley. After that, I'd say Jacob Farrow is probably the best kick. And I say right now, he's probably, in the top 5 kicks in the team already. So that's a lot for Jacob Farrow. But the next spot is probably going to be the most controversial, and I know I'll get a few comments for this because I know that quite a few of you guys don't like this guy. I think he's a genuine asset. I think we can be a genuine asset, and he's shown that at his best he can be a genuine role player, which is an important thing to be in a team, especially when you're a player like this guy is with his versatility and more importantly, height. I think Harry Jones next year if he can improve or recover from that ankle injury and get back playing good footy, become a fitter athlete, I think he's someone who could still be a good player. You know, we've been saying for a while, Harry Jones is probably the one that's maybe stagnated a bit with his development. You know, we saw major signs in 2021, and since then we've seen glimpses, and we've seen him, you know, he obviously took out the Everything Essendon role player of the year in 2024 off that wing, and I think that's the kind of role that Harry Jones would play in a 5-man bench. I think when I'm looking at my bench, you need a bit more height. You know, I think teams really like extra height on a footy field, and that's the reason why so many, so many hated the sub rule, because you couldn't just have a tall player as the sub. You had to often sub out taller players to bring in smaller ones, and that's why dual ruck setups are going to really work in 2026. But I think the next best thing you can do is get a bit of a mobile, tall, utility type player, and that is Harry Jones. I don't feel good about that selection. I think there's about 6 or 7 other players you could have added in front of him, but I think for the system, for the structure, and you know, the possibility of what Harry Jones could do for our team, with a fully fit team, of course, I think it makes sense to have him in. And I think if he's fit, he's going to be one who plays a fair bit of footy. I think the coaches like him. They see what he can be. I'm still sticking with Harry Jones for the future. I think he's one that, you know, gets slept on a little bit, obviously, because of that ankle injury. He missed so much footy last year, but it is a big year for him. It's a big year for a lot of these players, really. So let's go through the team as a whole. You've got Jordan Ridley, Zach Reed, Andy McGrath, Mason Redman, Ben Mackay, and Archie Roberts in that back line. I think that's a really solid back line. Obviously, it's a very injury-prone backline. 3 or 4 of those players, you know, missed most of the season last year. You go into the midfield where you've got Dersma and Fiorini as a wing combo. I really like that. Merritt, Durham, Caldwell, Parrish, and Sharp on the bench as well, with Blackiston in the ruck. You go forward and you've got that excitement with Kako, Caddy, and Roby. You go down with the experience of Langford, Peter Wright, and Matt Guelphy, some experience there. And then you round out the bench with some more youngsters in Angus Clark, Jacob Farrow, and Harry Jones. I think the main thing to note there is that it is a very young team. I think we're going to be a very young team in 2026. It's going to be about building for the future, you know, not just trying to win games, but getting games into these young players, into Roby, Sharp, Farrow, maybe even the other youngsters that we drafted as well, potentially. But I think next year, even without injuries, we're going to be a young team, and that is something to note. Now, I've been a bit cheeky and conducted a reserves team as well. These are the guys not in the side that, you know, are on Essendon's list, and this shows you that if we are fit, we've got a pretty decent VFL side, hopefully. You've got Jaden Newen, who I absolutely love down back. You've got Lewis Hayes, who I absolutely love down back. Kale Jerian, I genuinely think could play footy in 2026. I think all 3 of those guys could play footy next year, and they've shown that they can, bar Jerian, of course. Zach Johnson is you know, I think he's one that could easily break into this first team, and I was really tossing up between him and Harry Jones on that bench spot for that last edition, but I think we were too similar with you know, Johnson and Farrow and these, you know, ball users out of the back half. Nick Cox and Jackson Pryor round out that defence. Jackson Pryor, I think, is still going to play a lot of footy next year when there are some injuries. Like, inevitably, there are going to be injuries to pretty much every zone. Jackson Pryor is probably going to be one of the guys that comes in straight away. You know, he's not on the bench. He's not in the main 23, but he's one of the 4 or 5 names outside of it who I'd be backing in to come in and play straight away if available. You've also got Max Contagianis on the wing. He's more of a defender, but we didn't have a wingman. Sardell Hawley on the other wing, who would be hoping to play a bit of footy, and he's been tearing it up on the track a bit recently as well, apparently. Nick Martin in the guts won't be playing footy. He's done his ACL. Nick Bryan in the ruck, Elijah Sardis and Will Setterfield in the guts. Will Setterfield is not even an Essendon player yet, but it is believed he is going to sign on for that SSP spot to replace Nick Martin and that knee. In the forward line, you've got Archie Perkins, Liam McMahon, Jade Gresham, Reece Unwin, Archer May, and Hussein Elachkar. Of the guys there, I expect Archie Perkins and Archer May to be playing more senior footy. Jade Gresham too, but I think, you know, McMahon, Unwin, Huss are probably going to be in the VFL for quite a lot of the year. And then on the bench, you've got Vigo Vicentini, who I think will be in the VFL quite a bit. Archer Daywicks, again, VFL. Tom Edwards, I still think that the club could use him. I think he's someone who could surprise. I wouldn't be surprised if he comes in and surprises us with his form next year. And of course, the Irish gem, Mr. Killian Burke, who I've been chatting to so many people in Ireland about this guy in the last few days, and they absolutely love him. I'm trying to arrange a way to get some Essendon scarves to be sent out there to Ireland, because I think that'd be really fun, and get some of them into the footy, because a lot of them, by the way, are going to be going for the Bombers next year, they told me, which is great. But guys, that is my best 23. Let me know what you think down below. If it helps you, I'm really not sold on it. I'm not happy with the 23. There are quite a few names I could pick and choose and fling around to different spots. There are a few on the outside that I don't feel good about leaving on the outside. Zach Johnson, my boy, Jackson Pryor, my boy. There's a few of my boys on the outside. But I think what this tells you is that it's going to be a really interesting year for the development of the football club, seeing the young players in the senior team develop, but also the VFL. Like, there are quite, I think we were saying this last year about the draft last year, that the VFL was going to be so interesting to watch. Obviously, with all those injuries, the interest kind of faded away because there were some weeks, 3 or 4 AFL players in the VFL. But next year, if we're a fitter team, the VFL is going to be fascinating because we have so many players on the list, young players who are going to be trying to keep their list spots, open for next year, because there's quite a few out of contract. So I'll make a video about that soon, the contract situation of the club right now. But guys, that's all. Let me know what you think down below. What changes would you make to this 23? Make sure you like the video if you enjoyed, subscribe if you're new to the channel, and as always, go Bombers.